It's Dave and Evelyn from the camera store, and today we're going to give you our first look of the Canon EOS R1.
All right, this is it. This is the true flagship in the R series. This is the R1, and it is a action-packed camera.
Dave, you've been waiting for this for a long time.
I have been.
And this kind of follows the ethos of Canon's 1 series cameras that we saw with their DSLRs. This is an action-packed camera with a lot of performance-enhanced features. It is packed around a 24-megapixel stacked sensor with in-body image stabilization. We're gonna get into so many features. And to do that, we are here at the Cavalry FC. This is in Calgary at Spruce Meadows. So thanks so much to the team for letting us shoot a practice today so we can put this camera through its paces.
So yeah, I am excited about this camera. And the one thing right off the bat when you pick this camera up is it's deceptively light. I mean, the CPR rating on this camera is 1,115 grams, making it a very light full frame body with integrated grip. And that is great if I'm teaming it up with all the different lenses I'm going to be working with today. Now, what I like about the 1 series bodies, and I've always liked about 1 series bodies, is their build quality. There's the top line that Canon makes, fully weather sealed and able to withstand heavy use. That's what they're designed for. The hardcore working professional who's covering sport event after sport event after sport event, this camera is going to be able to take it. If you had a chance to put your hands on a Canon R3, this camera is going to feel very similar, and with good reason. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on every single button on this camera because there's quite a few of them. However, I do like what Canon has, and the ergonomics of these cameras are great in both the horizontal and the vertical orientation. The front of the camera here, we have 2 custom control buttons here, and they're the same spot whether I'm holding the camera horizontally or vertically. And the same with the rear dial in the back here. It's the same position for your thumb, horizontally or vertically. It's a really well laid out camera, and the more time you spend with it, the more it just becomes truly an extension of your hand. Now, this camera is all about speed and performance, so instead of where the R3 has a CF Express Type B card and an SD card, this R1 features now dual CF Express Type B card slots. So it's all about speed and power. And speaking of power, we are using the same LPE19 battery found in the R3. Now, the CPR rating for this battery is well over 1,000 shots. However, I can tell you today I put on well over a couple thousand shots and didn't have to worry about the battery once today. So I'm confident with the battery on this camera. That's not going to be an issue whatsoever. Now, what I do like when I'm working this camera is the controls we have. So we have the usual dial above the shutter button, we have the dial above my thumb here, and also the rear dial back here. All are really well implemented and make this camera a pleasure to use. Now, the trackpad button on the back here operates just like it did on the R3. However, now it is a 2-position, just like your focus button. You can halfway depress it or fully depress it as well for 2 different actions there. And on the top of the camera, we do have the new multi-function hot shoe with a really robust cover on there, which is sometimes a pain to get off, I'm going to tell you that much. But when it's on, it is on solid and helps with the integrity of the whole weather sealing. Now, the one thing you're going to be looking through all the time is the viewfinder, and I can't say enough about how good this viewfinder is. It is incredibly big and very, very bright. It's 9.4 million dots of resolution, and it's giving us a great experience. And when it comes to shooting sports in action, the refresh rate on here is fantastic. And part of the viewfinder experience is also a blackout-free experience. So when you're tracking some very fast action, people running towards the camera, for instance, there's no blackout whatsoever, so I can more accurately keep my content in frame. So the whole experience of this viewfinder makes this camera that much more seamless to get good quality shots with. So I can't say enough how much I really appreciate the viewfinder built into this camera. As we work our way around the camera here, we do have a very responsive touchscreen that's fully articulating to the side here. I like this configuration quite a bit and find myself doing a lot of low angle shots using this screen off to the side like that. As we work our way to the left-hand side of the camera here, this is where all our ports are, all our connectivity is. We do have a headphone jack, we do have a microphone jack, we do have a USB-C connection, as well as a full-size HDMI port, which I really, really like. It's so much more robust than the micro or the mini HDMIs. Below that, we do have an Ethernet port as well, because this camera is going to be used in professional sporting events. Oftentimes delivering your content as quickly as possible is required. And then we do also have a flash PC port here, which I'm not sure who uses anymore, but it's included on this camera. I mean, overall, if you've been already running the 1 series bodies, this camera is going to feel right at home with you. And it's a very comfortable camera that's really well laid out and weather sealed and designed to take the abuse that a pro photographer is going to put it through day after day.
Before I get into the performance and image quality of the R1, I do have to preface by saying that we are getting a first look of a pre-production unit. So there are a few things that we're not able to quite test yet, including the raw performance, the dynamic range. But there's a lot of exciting things that we can talk about with this pre-production unit. And I have to reiterate what Dave was saying, that the feel of this camera is fantastic. It's surprisingly lightweight. And when it's paired with the Canon RF lenses, this package is absolutely amazing. Like, I think a lot of professional photographers, people that are shooting every day, they're shooting sports and action on the sidelines, are gonna enjoy the feel of this camera. But what's the most important thing is how well it functions. So this has a 24 megapixel sensor, and it is built for speed and performance. Again, like I said, it's taking after the ethos of the DSLR cameras, the 1 series, and that's what they've made this camera all about. So first of all, this 24 megapixel sensor is stacked, and it has in-body image stabilization. Now, the stacked sensor actually gives significantly less rolling shutter that we saw in the Canon EOS R3. It is the fastest scanning sensor in the Canon lineup, period. And it opens up the door for a lot of different possibilities. So they've paired it with their Digic X processor, and they've also added a Digic accelerator. So that's a lot of gobbledygook for this camera. Is made for speed. So it can shoot 40 frames per second, and it has a lot of really cool, advanced, intelligent autofocus features, and a lot of it that you can customize depending on what you're shooting. So today we're shooting soccer, and so we were able to put it in an action priority mode and prioritize it for shooting soccer. It also has the ability to do that for basketball or volleyball, and it does such an awesome job keeping up with that action. So today when we were shooting the Calgary team, it was really cool seeing them practice, and we're able to keep on top of the ball. So if you have it just in the regular mode, you're able to have it go onto the player with the ball, and then as soon as that ball moves in play, I actually saw it shift to the other player. I just had the back button autofocused engaged, and it was able to use the intelligent learning that's been built into the camera to keep up with that play. Now, if you're someone that is shooting for a specific team, you also have the ability to customize it so far as to put in specific profiles. So you can actually get a shot of the player. You have to do it with the camera. You can also, if you've shot the team before, you can keep it from the memory card as well. And those files can be saved, and you can actually lock onto the profile of that specific player. So this is really cool if you're like a team photographer. I can see it being used for events. You know, this would be a pretty high caliber camera for weddings, but the R5 does the same kind of technology as well. So you can check out our review on that camera. But this is just really interesting technology, and it's taking that whole idea of machine learning to the next level. They've added more tracking abilities for people in general, you know, torsos, bodies. We're seeing it being a lot more responsive than we have in other Canon EOS system cameras. And they also have put in profiles like the horse detection that we saw in the R6 Mark II. We thought that was really great. You know, working with a rider and a horse, depending on what you're shooting, you have a lot more options for utilizing that deep learning functionality. Another cool feature that you can customize to your own eyeball is the eye control autofocus. Now, this is something that has evolved since the late 1990s. It was in the EOS 3, and this actually works with more eyes. It's able to track your eye and move your autofocus that way. So again, it just is another tool that you can use for autofocus. However, for me personally, I really like just putting it in the action priority, selecting the sport, and being able to utilize that technology. But of course, depending on what you're shooting and what your preferences are for how the autofocus performs, it's nice that you have a lot of customizability in this professional camera. So performance, how does this all work, and what kind of shots are we seeing? We're getting a very good hit rate. You know, we were seeing today that we would get sequences where every shot was in focus. It was able to keep up with the ball, and I can honestly say that it is the best Canon autofocus performance that I've seen. And in the future, we would like to put this up against the other camera systems, you know, Nikon and Sony. But overall, it's Canon's best-in-class autofocus system, and it was just a joy to use. We stopped thinking about the autofocus, and to me, that's when you know that it's good, is when it's just second nature. You're not like, oh, I'm missing shots. It just kind of works with you and works with your brain as you're capturing and composing these images. Now, speaking of images, how's the image quality looking? Again, we have to say it's pre-production, so we're not able to look at the raw files, but things are looking really sharp. I love the Canon color, and I think that I'm not going to be surprised if we're just going to love the Canon files that come out of this. They have a very good track record, and I think this is going to be no exception. Now, with it being a stacked sensor, are we going to take a look at dynamic range later on? Absolutely. We are expecting a little bit of loss of that dynamic range, but again, for getting all of the performance and new autofocus abilities, all the things that you're getting with this camera, I would trade that for a little bit of loss of dynamic range if I was to choose between the two. You know what else we were finding the autofocus really good for is video. We were having some fun shooting video with this camera because it has some good functionality, very similar to the R5 II. Hey, Dave?
Definitely, the video is very potent on this camera. The autofocus is, I think, has to be sort of the flagship feature on this camera, right? Because
totally.
it's all about capturing the images.
Yeah, but for people that are photojournalists, there's a high demand for them also being able to get video clips on the fly. The autofocus works seamlessly for photo and for video. We're really impressed with the performance. And it's great to see that for photojournalists, they have a smooth transition between photo and video features. I like that you can switch into the video mode, have a completely separate group of settings. And it's great to see, especially for photojournalists that are required to do both photo and video at the same time, you can actually literally do it at the same time.
That's a very cool feature. If you don't need the highest quality of content, if you're just delivering it to social media platforms, it's just fine. You're doing 1080 video, but you can capture 17 megapixel still image alongside with that in various different frame rates. You just can't change the exposure between the two. The video and the stills are still the same exposure, but it's very cool to be able to have that ability in both.
Yeah, and if you want to get higher quality video, you can also shoot 6K 60p RAW, and you can also get into the great 4K settings. We got 4K 60, 4K 120 with audio, and they also have 2K 240, which is great for getting like high speed action. You slow it down, you can get those little blades of grass kicking off from the field. It's really fun to work with. Of course, you're taking advantage of the in-body image stabilization as well. So again, for photojournalists that also are doing video, it's going to be able to keep up with a lot of industry standards for the type of formats that you're going to need to shoot.
All these features built into this camera make it a really powerful tool to keep in your hands to shoot all kinds of content.
Yeah, and also if you're someone that is recording yourself or something at a game where you want to have the subject know when you're recording, it has the tally lamp, and there are some definite video assist tools that are in this. It's not like a full-fledged cinema camera, but they're definitely taking some cues from the cinema line, putting it in this, and so that people that are doing multimedia work will be pretty happy and at home with it. Well, Dave, it's here. The R1. Did you enjoy it? Were you happy?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, these are a really big shoe for Canon to fill. The R1, this is their flagship. This is their all-out attack on state-of-the-art technology. This is the best that they can make in all aspects of a camera.
Yeah, and of course this was just like our first impressions. There's still some other little things that we didn't even get into. You know, it has things like pre-capture and upscaling your images. You know, there's a lot of really cool tools that are built into this camera. But there's one little elephant in the room, or maybe a big one. But a lot of people, you know, when they're anticipating this camera, even back when like the R3 was announced, they were kind of expecting like this top ultimate spec camera, and 24 megapixels, you know, is that low? Do you think it's appropriate for this type of camera system?
I mean, when you can buy the R5 Mark II with 45 megapixels for less money, you know, is 24 megapixels.
And that's a pretty high action camera too.
Yeah, I mean, is 24 megapixels going to be enough? And the way I look at it for this style of camera, where it's all about speed, and not just a matter of speed of capturing the events, but also delivering the events, and the smaller file sizes certainly make it more applicable. But often, if you are working these events professionally, you have access where you're not cropping super aggressively anyways. You don't necessarily need the higher resolution, which might slow you down in the post-production side of things.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the proven sweet spot for professional photojournalists. But you know, there's going to be definitely some people that are expecting to have like a higher resolution camera, and I think that's where the R5 II comes into play. And it was really great to see that Canon has put the technology in both of them. I mean, there was so much crossover; it was almost hard to keep track of like which camera we were even talking about, because both of them have so much of this new tech, this new deep learning, and this new processing ability to be able to be like this high performance workhorse.
But ultimately, you said it earlier, right? Is that we stopped worrying about the autofocus because it was so good. We just got concentrated on the scene and capturing, keeping the players in frame and just blasting away, and the camera kept up and it locked on and it was predicting where the action was going to be. And that is a real testament to this camera, how good the autofocus is and what can I deliver.
Yeah, but of course we want to know, you the viewer, What are your thoughts on this? Where does it hit? What are the sweet spots? Do you think that this was the R1 that you were expecting? Let us know all your thoughts in the comments below.
And make sure you follow us both on Instagram.
It's been Dave and Evelyn from the Camera Store. We'll catch you again very soon.
Hey, I hope you've enjoyed watching this episode on the brand new flagship Canon R1. If you want to check out more of our recent content, click up here. And if you're a Canadian and you want to support local, check out thecamerastore.com down here.